Let's dive in. U.S., Russia, Ukraine. It's the kind of global situation that just keeps on giving, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's tricky to keep up, too. So much happening at once.
Absolutely. Feels like every day brings some fresh drama or another.
Totally.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? To sort of break it all down and see what we can make sense of.
That's the goal.
So today we've got three pieces we're going to look at. One's about these U.S. Russia talks. Another is on, well, something you wouldn't immediately connect. The Baltic states making some big energy moves.
Interesting.
And then this one, well, it's kind of out of left field, but federal layoffs under the Trump administration.
Okay, yeah. Now, how do those fit in?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to figure out. Like, how are these things actually all tied together,
Definitely curious.
And, what's the bigger picture here for the world, for us, the whole deal?
All right, let's unpack it.
So first up, these talks between the U.S. and Russia.
Okay.
Thing is, right off the bat, it's weird. Ukraine's not even there. No representation.
That's unusual, isn't it? Usually you'd want all the key players at the table.
Exactly. So that's red flag number one, I'm thinking. Then you've got Trump making statements like, Russia's got the upper hand because they took land. Like, he's straight up saying it.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly a take.
And then he goes on to say he trusts Russia wants peace.
Wow. Okay, that's not the message a lot of world leaders are sending, that's for sure.
Not at all. And get this, he calls Zelensky a dictator. Can you believe it?
Seriously.
Oh, man, the diplomatic fallout from that must have been intense.
Oh, for sure. Leaders from like Germany, UK, they all came out swinging, saying how that's just not cool.
Yeah, and backing Zelensky, right?
Absolutely. Plus, the BBC's reporting that Zelensky still got like 57% approval from Ukrainians.
So clearly not the dictator image Trump's painting.
Nope, not at all. But okay, name-calling aside, Trump's also saying Ukraine messed up by not making a deal sooner, avoiding the whole war.
Huh. That's kind of putting the blame on the victim, isn't it?
Feels that way, right? Like, who started this whole thing again? Definitely muddies the waters about, responsibility and all that.
Big time. And with Ukraine shut out of these U.S. Russia talks?
Yeah, it's not looking good for them, is it? Like, if peace means they got to give up land, is that even a win?
Tough question. And what's this mean for other countries watching this all go down if the U.S. has taken this approach?
Yeah, it's a signal, that's for sure. We'll see how it plays out.
Makes you think, like smaller nations caught between these superpowers, what choices do they even have?
Exactly. They got to walk a tightrope, that's for sure.
Speaking of navigating tricky situations, let's jump over to the Baltic states for a sec. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they just did something pretty bold.
Oh, yeah. Win.
They cut the cord. No more Russian power grid for them.
Whoa, really? That's a huge step.
Decades in the making, apparently.
That's dedication.
And get this, they had this, 9-meter-tall clock counting down to the moment they switched over.
Seriously. Wow, that's a statement. That this isn't just symbolic, right? What's the strategic play here?
Oh, it's definitely strategic. They're all in on the EU now, energy-wise. And I guess message-wise, too.
Right, like, we're independent, we're with Europe, and we don't need you, Russia.
Exactly. But the big thing, I think, is it takes away one of Russia's big weapons. Energy control.
Totally. Can't use that as leverage if they're not relying on you anymore.
So is this a trend we're seeing? Countries pushing back against Russia's influence, trying to break free?
It's possible. The Baltic states have definitely set a precedent. Others might be watching closely.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Okay, so we've got these power plays going on globally, but let's shift gears for a minute and zoom in on something seemingly internal to the U.S.
Okay.
Federal layoffs under the Trump administration. Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem like it would have anything to do with Russia or Ukraine, right?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Seems like domestic policy stuff.
Right. But stick with me here. This article talks about cuts to the State Department, intelligence agencies, even organizations that do humanitarian aid.
Yeah. That's concerning.
So think about it. If these agencies are weaker, less staffed, less funded, does that help or hurt the U.S.'s ability to deal with global stuff?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. If they can't engage as effectively, it could indirectly benefit Russia, right? Less opposition on the world stage.
Exactly. It's like this unintended consequence of internal politics.
Makes you think, like how much do our domestic decisions actually ripple outward, affecting the whole balance of power out there?
it's all connected in ways we might not always realize.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating and frankly kind of scary too.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Like we think about layoffs and it's like, oh, it's a bummer for those folks, but then it goes global.
It's the butterfly effect in action, really.
Yeah.
One seemingly small change over here.
And the whole world's flapping its wings.
Exactly.
So let's dig into these layoffs a bit more. This article, it specifically mentions like the State Department getting hit, the folks who do diplomacy, negotiations, all that.
Yeah, that's not good.
And then intelligence agencies too, right? The ones keeping tabs on what other countries are up to.
Less intel, less understanding of the playing field. Not a good combo.
And then, this is the one that really gets me, cuts to humanitarian aid.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's tough.
So, less staff, less money for those organizations. What happens when there's a crisis somewhere, a natural disaster, refugees, whatever?
The U.S. can't respond as effectively, that's for sure. And those in need, they suffer the consequences.
It's a tough pill to swallow, It's like, are we stepping back from that global leadership role?
It's a possibility, and a worrying one for a lot of people. If the U.S. retreats, who fills that void?
Right. And it's not like there's a shortage of folks ready to step in with maybe not so great intentions.
Exactly. Power vacuums rarely stay empty for long.
Okay, but let's bring this back down to earth for a sec. Our listener, right now, they might be thinking, okay, interesting global chess game, but what's it got to do with me?
Good point. Let's connect the dots. Think about it this way. If the U.S. can't help stabilize regions where there's conflict.
Those conflicts can spread.
Right, and that means things like trade routes getting disrupted, supply chains breaking down.
And suddenly your groceries cost more.
Exactly. It hits home, literally.
And then there's the whole emboldening thing, right? If Russia sees weakness, they might get more aggressive.
It's a classic power dynamic. Push where there's less resistance.
And that could spiral, right? More conflict, more instability, nobody wins.
It's a slippery slope, that's for sure.
So yeah, these internal decisions, they might seem far removed from our daily lives,
but they can have massive ripple effects, influencing everything from our wallets to global security.
It's all connected, folks. Okay, so we talk layoffs, but let's loop back to that Baltic states move. Remember, they ditched the Russian power grid.
Yeah, bold move.
Now, it seems like a separate thing, but is it really? Could a less engaged U.S. be a factor in how other countries are thinking about their own security?
Interesting question. On one hand, the Baltics, they went for it regardless, right? Like, we're doing this with or without you, U.S.
Total independence vibe.
But on the other hand, if the U.S. isn't seen as reliable,
it gets riskier for others to follow suit.
Especially if they might face blowback from, say, Russia.
Like, the Baltics pulled it off, but could others? Especially if they're looking to the U.S. and seeing, like, a shrug.
It makes a difference, that's for sure. The U.S. has a long history of backing up democracies, promoting stability. If that's less certain,
the world gets a whole lot more unpredictable.
Especially for the little guys, trying to stand on their own 2 feet.
Makes you think, huh? Like, are we in this new era of global power where the old rules are out the window?
Feels that way sometimes. And the big question is, where do we go from here? More cooperation or a free-for-all?
Big questions, man. Okay, before we get too deep in existential crisis mode, let's circle back to those layoffs for a sec.
Okay.
Specifically, that Elon Musk twist. He's in charge of streamlining the government now. Like, what?
Yeah, the Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE for short.
DOGE. I mean, come on. That's either brilliant or totally nuts.
It's Elon, so probably both.
Right. But seriously, the guy wants to colonize Mars, and now he's in charge of, like, paperwork and bureaucracy.
It's definitely a departure from the usual way of doing things.
So what's the plan, anyway?
Well, details are scarce, but there's talk of AI bureaucrats, blockchain voting.
Wait, AI bureaucrats? Like robots handling our taxes?
Possibly. And get this, there's even a proposal to put all government services into one app.
One app? Everything. That's ambitious, to say the least.
It's a radical vision, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Streamlining, efficiency, everything at your fingertips.
That's kind of cool, in a futuristic way.
Right. But then you got to think about the downsides. So much power concentrated in one system. What could go wrong?
Privacy issues, for one.
Definitely. And accountability, too. Who's in control, really?
It's a trade-off, right? Efficiency versus control.
And the potential for misuse if the wrong hands get on the controls.
It's a whole sci-fi movie in the making, right? Shiny tech, but with a dark side.
It's a good reminder that technology, it's a tool. It can be used for good or bad. Depends on who's wielding it.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Power shifts, energy independence, the impact of U.S. decisions, and now Elon Musk playing Sim City with the government. It's a lot to process.
It is, but I think the key takeaway here is that we're in uncharted territory globally. The old ways of thinking, they're not holding up anymore.
And the future's a big old question mark.
But that also means there's opportunity, right?
Wow.
To shape things, to figure out what this new world looks like.
So as we head into the last part of our deep dive, we want to leave you with some things to think about. How does all this connect with your life, your beliefs? What kind of future do you want?
We'll explore those questions and more in our final segment.
Welcome back for the final stretch. Phew, we've covered some serious ground, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been a dense one for sure. But hopefully our listeners are feeling more informed now, maybe even a bit energized.
Empowered, even. Like, okay, I get it now. I see what's going on.
That's the hope, at least. Because knowledge, right, that's where the power lies. The more we grasp what's happening in the world, the better we can handle whatever comes our way.
Totally. And today, we've had a real mix, right? U.S., Russia, Ukraine, always a hot topic, but then the ripple effects of U.S. policies.
And Elon Musk getting in on the action, of course. Can't forget that.
Definitely a wild card. So much to unpack, but if we had to boil it down, what are the big takeaways, the things people should really remember from this deep dive?
All right, so lesson number one, got to ditch that island mentality. We're not isolated from global events no matter how much we might want to be.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in our own lives and kind of tune out the rest of the world, but
But that can backfire big time. Because what happens over there, it can affect us right here, whether it's a war, a policy change, whatever.
so we got to pay attention, stay informed, but, and this is a big one, how do we even do that these days? Information overload, 24/7 news cycle, it's crazy.
It is. And that's where critical thinking skills become crucial. We can't just swallow everything we're fed. Got to question sources, check biases, do our own homework.
Like, develop that healthy skepticism, right? Don't just believe everything you read.
Exactly. Because, let's be real, there's a lot of folks out there trying to manipulate us using information as a weapon for their own gain.
So, awareness, check. Critical thinking, check. What else can we do to be more, engaged citizens of the world?
I'd say one of the most powerful things is talk to each other, even when it's tough, especially with people we disagree with.
Oh, yeah, that's the hard part. It's so much easier to stick to our own echo chambers where everyone agrees.
But that gets us nowhere, right? True understanding, progress, it comes from engaging with different viewpoints, even when it's uncomfortable.
It's like, how do we have those conversations without it getting personal nasty? Because it's so easy to fall into that trap these days.
It's a skill, for sure. Start by listening, genuinely trying to grasp where the other person's coming from, even if you don't land in the same place.
It's not about winning the argument, but more like building a bridge,
Exactly. Finding that common ground, remembering we're all human, even when we disagree.
And who knows, maybe we even learn something new, change our minds a bit when we open ourselves up to those different perspectives.
That's the beauty of it, right? We grow the most when we're challenged, pushed outside our comfort zones.
So to our listeners out there, I think that's a great takeaway. Stay curious, stay engaged, keep asking those tough questions. The world needs more folks like that.
Couldn't agree more. It's a complex world, always changing, but we all have a role to play in shaping it, for better or worse.
And we believe in you guys out there to be a force for good, to make those positive changes happen.
Absolutely. Keep learning, keep talking, keep making your voices heard. That's what matters.
It's been a blast exploring all this with you today, and we hope you'll keep digging deeper, staying curious about the world. Thanks for joining us.